Everybody, this is such an obedient, compliant crowd. I'm like, why is everybody getting quiet? Usually I have to get Juliet over here to help me get everybody going, but you must know that Das is here. Governor Das is in charge. Everything's going to go fine. No, but seriously though, I am so honored to be here this morning to get to kick us off. And I was feeling a little bit emotional on my walk here and just realizing that we don't get to come together very often in person, and so it just feels more special to be here, especially to celebrate something that's important. And so for those of you who I don't know, I'm Barry Leslie. I run the most important state agency, right, Superintendent? That's right. I am the Director of the Department of Administrative Services and really honored to be the state's Chief Operating Officer. And just really thrilled that, as I understand from organizers who put together this event, that we were kind of sold out in the first day or two, which I think is really a reflection of the pent-up demand for us to come together and honor and celebrate really meaningful and important things. And so hopefully with the DAS team, this could just be the first of many, many things. And just thanks to everybody who really worked so hard to bring this together. And Governor, thank you for being here this morning to listen, to learn, to celebrate with us. I know it's busy during session. We just really appreciate your being here. I was thinking about just this morning reflecting on getting to kick this off and the honor that is, and also thinking about the work that our Black leaders who lead us in DEI work do across the state, and wanting to think about how to honor them and their experience and their effort, and frankly just the energy you're putting into us this morning by honoring us with your time and experience. And so thinking about how I can make sure to honor your energy by having a lot of intention about how I'm listening to you this morning. And so I thought of a few things I want to share with you, and I would invite all of you, and particularly if you don't share the same lived experience as our panelists, invite you to share these intentions with me or to have your own intentions, whatever is meaningful to you, to really honor the energy and commitment of the experience and the time this morning. So first, I plan to listen. And believe your experience and your expertise without question. Second, I'm going to honor your wisdom and experience and allow myself to be uncomfortable at times when I feel uncomfortable without rationalizing, justifying, or explaining. I'm just going to be uncomfortable. And then third, and I think this is just really important for all of us, is to really listen for the things that we can learn from you to help us improve the lives for our Black employees and ultimately the Black Oregonians and communities we serve. Because the takeaways that we can all gain from what we learned this morning can be most impactful across the state and of course in the communities we serve. So those are my three intentions. More than anything else, I just want to celebrate with you this morning, celebrate as a community, and just really appreciate our panelists for being here this morning, and to really appreciate Naima, who's going to facilitate our conversation. So, over to you.
All right, thank you, Barry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Naima Chambers. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm with the Department of Corrections. And I am honored, to be able to facilitate this panel. So let me introduce, or have folks introduce themselves, and we'll start with Brian.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Campbell. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm I'm the DEI manager at For Business Oregon. Thanks for coming this morning.
Good morning, all. My name is Chelsea Bunch. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion with Oregon Housing and Community Services. Great to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamal Fox. Good morning. My name is Jamal Fox. I'm the Executive Director for the Board of Pharmacy, he, him pronouns.
Good morning, everyone. Dion Jordan, he, him, his, Director of Office of Equity and Multicultural Services, or Human Services.
Good morning. I'm Leanne Johnson, Director of the Equity and Inclusion Division for the Oregon Health Authority. She, her, hers, and a proud descendant of the Bantu and Khoisan tribes of Africa.
Ezel Watson III. I use he or they pronouns. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Oregon's Public Utility Commission. Very glad to be here today.
Sorry, some of the mics aren't working. My name is Kenny Lowe. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager at Oregon State Police.
All right, well, let's just jump right in. Ready? Ready. All right. All right, so the first question, Chelsea, I'm going to ask you to start us off here. How does it feel to be up here today? Whew, okay.
So good, a bit nervous. It's always a little nerve-wracking to talk in front of a bunch of people who are just looking at you, so bear with us all. I think I'm just really excited, one, to be in community with other Black folks in leadership, because it gets lonely. So I feel a lot of joy being up here and being able to share this space and the time with you all. And I think one of the things that I hope for is that you get a diverse understanding of all the different experiences that we all have. While we are celebrating Black History Month, I think it's really important for folks to know that the diaspora is broad and deep. And so our experiences are going to be varied. And I think that that's important to know and just kind of focus on. So I'm just really, really excited to be here.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, how does it feel?
Thank you. Well, amplifying everything that Chelsea said. And as I was driving here, I was a little nervous. And at previous days previous to this, I've been a bit nervous. And then I remembered, I'm not going to be alone. Look at this panel, look at this room. And that made a difference. I will say that in the Pacific Northwest, there are many experiences of loneliness at times, many experiences of being the only voice in the room that's talking about equity and inclusion and diversity and justice. And I hearken back to, I'm just going to share an experience when I was most lonely, and that was when my two children, who are now grown, at the time they were 8 and 6, and we were buying parakeets for my oldest child, and we ended up in a corner in the pet store with 3 Aryan Nation racist skinheads hovering over us, a mother and 2 children. And nobody in that store seemed to notice. So loneliness and that sense of no one being there for you is traumatic for me, and I can say I don't feel that today. Thank you.
Thanks, I'm going to ask the same question for the rest of y'all. So, Jamal, how's it feel to be up here today?
Thank you for the question. I was thinking about that on my drive up here, and it feels amazing to be up here with other Black excellent leaders across the state that I don't get to see very often. I've only been with the state a short while, 125 days to be exact. But the experiences that I've had before coming to the state and the intentionality of an event like this doesn't happen without great support, ideas. Thank Brian, I want to thank the Office of Cultural Change, Barry, for the support to be able to put something like this together, to bring a conversation in Black History Month about Black and African American folks in the state. So the word that I really thought about is appreciation. Appreciate you all for being here, appreciate my colleagues on this panel, just appreciating to having this conversation.
Thank you, Jamal. You fail.
I'd say two main words. I got a little timer, so I'd say maybe two or three words that come to mind for me, and maybe they're a little bit at odds, but I feel safe and secure on one hand, and on the other hand, I feel fearful. I'd really like to acknowledge the fact that I feel physically safe right now, because there are so many people in the world today, in our country, in our city, and abroad, who do not feel safe. But I also feel a little fearful. I appreciate Barry earlier saying that I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to try to justify. I'm a little fearful because I believe that I want to share some difficult truths. So I'm a bit fearful.
Thank you, Isa.
I'll lead with difficult truth because I have mixed feelings about what feels like a performative aspect of gathering in Black history and acknowledging the sacrifices, the achievements, the excellence, the knowledge, skills, and abilities of everybody up here. So I'll lead with that because I have mixed feelings. But it's also an honor and a privilege. In my head, I'm just a poor kid from Northeast Portland. And so to share space and be in a space with the governor, it's a unique experience for me, something that I don't take for granted. Because not a lot of people from my neighborhood, not a lot of friends, not a lot of people that look like me have that same opportunity.
Thank you, Dion.
Thank you. So, similar to what my colleagues shared, first of all, I feel super humble. Like, I never feel worthy enough, in the work that we do. But at the same time, I have this strange feeling in between glad and sad, right? And I think the part, I'll start with the sad so I can end on a high note here, right? I'm 54 years old. I've seen this before, right? I remember sitting on the lap of my father and seeing James Brown, seeing James Baldwin, seeing Angela Davis, right? Having a similar conversation. And so part of me that's sad is that this ends up being trying to justify our humanity. If this is still about just equal rights, right? We're not gonna talk about equity, just equal rights. Then I'm gonna be sad here, right? But if the conversation is something different, right? If the conversation is more, moving forward, then I'm gonna be a lot more glad. So that's why I'm kind of stuck in between, but definitely honored to be here and grateful to be able to sit in a position to have a voice. So thank you.
Thank you. Ryan.
I think this morning I have such feeling of appreciation for my fellow panelists here, for their desire and ability to partner and to come out and to share their experiences with all of us. When I first had this idea and brought it to Melinda, I was just thinking kind of like, working on this notion, I have been thinking about nothing about them without them, and nothing about us without us. However, all of us, most of us do a lot of this work independent. And it gets lonely and it gets hard, and it made me begin to think as a pretty long-term state employee. I've been a state employee for almost 24 years now and worked in 3 agencies. And I thought, when we have these agencies that are now getting these equity positions and hiring folks into these roles, do they really know who they're hiring? Do they care enough to know that they would show up? And so I thought, you'll never know unless we give an opportunity. And so out of that came all of this. And so even in the selection, like this isn't the extent of who we are. There are more of us out there, and our peers asked us to be up here, and that's an honor. So I feel honored to be a representative of our community. I feel honored to be a representative in this panel, and to have my voice as one of the voices that gets amplified to all of you, to help you better understand who we are, what we need in order to thrive, and what is it that makes us do what we do, and at times do it differently than what maybe some of you might think it should be.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right, next question. Ezel, can you share a story about what inspired you to pursue a career in DEI and how your identity has influenced your journey?
That's excellent question. Yes, I can. As a Black man who's also Northern Alabama Cherokee, but not able to actually be added to the registry because in Alabama, if you were connected to Black, meant you were connected to slave, and the natives, because of the way that the treaties were working with the federal government, really kind of had to distance themselves. Okay, so there's a little bit about my identity. Birmingham, Alabama, also one of these central seats, probably of the civil rights struggle. We have some history in our city. There was a bombing at a church, 16th Street, which was directly a counter to my barber shop that my uncle used to cut my hair. He'd go there and get a free haircut, okay? So, but let's fast forward to me getting to Portland. You asked how I got into this, right? This probably feels more like a calling. So I'll give you just a few things that I feel like the universe just orchestrated on my behalf. So I moved to Portland. I lived in Tigard. When I first got here, one of the questions that I asked was, where are all the black people? I'm serious. I literally asked that question, and I resolved to myself. I said, well, here's a couple of things you can do to know for sure where black people are. Find Martin Luther King Boulevard and find a barbershop. Okay? But you asked me how I got into this work. My first place of employment, I ran across a brand of bias that was unfamiliar to me. In Alabama, I feel like there's integrity with our racism. If you go into a restaurant, they will tell you, hey, we're not playing any hip-hop music in here tonight, or we don't serve any fried food. You say, oh, okay, thank you for letting me know where you stand. You know, decide whether or not you want to be there. Here in Oregon, you might go somewhere and maybe it's 45 minutes before you greet it, you're saying, are they just rude, or does this have something to do with my skin color? But let me fast forward. The job that I was hired to, I endured things like this. Ezel, do you know how much money we're paying you? Ezel, you make people uncomfortable by wearing a suit. When I stopped wearing a suit, Ezel, you are still making people a little uncomfortable. I started wearing tennis shoes. One person says, this was a white person, by the way, Ezel, are you trying to show us how much your shoes cost by wearing a tag? Michael Jordan shoes, which I started to get when I got to Portland because the generous people of Portland would allow me to go to the Nike store and pay 50% of the advertised price for the shoe. And I was like, this must be some sort of trick. But anyway, I ended up, I experienced racism here. While mitigating that, I worked for Portland Public Schools Office of Racial Equity and Partnerships. I experienced aggressive behavior in racial animus while working at Portland Public Schools. I left Portland Public Schools and came back to the industry that I was working in when I first got here, the tech industry, and now I am a DEI director for the Public Utility Commission. And I will go ahead and go on record to say that I've experienced some of the same things here in the state of Oregon, but I'm certainly going to talk about that a little bit later. I've exceeded my 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ezel. Deanna, I have the same question for you. If you can please share a story that inspired you to get into the
I appreciate that. So let me back up a second. I could tell you why I do the work, but I would like to answer that in the sense of, let me tell you why I stay in the work. Because to me, that's a deeper question. Because this work is hard, right? It's hard, just it was a 9 to 5. But when you're a person of color, there's no 9 to 5 in this work, right? When you leave, you still got to deal with the work. And government is a whole other beast in this work, right? And so, to me, the real question is, why am I even staying in work? About a year and a half ago, I will say this much, I was going to quit. It was too painful. It was too close to home. So it's to the point where I realized, like, oh, it's not fair to my family or even my whole soul to kind of stick in this. But then I went on a trip last year. My agency knows this, because I talk about it all the time. But I went on a trip to the Deep South, to South Carolina. I went to the White House. I went to a plantation in New Orleans. And then I finally ended up in Africa. I had to find some roots. I had to find some meaning. I had to find something to hold on to, right? I had to talk to some ancestors, some folks. But what was interesting is when I made it all the way to Africa and had the opportunity to hear the story from the hunted instead of always hearing it from the hunter, right? When I finally was able to hear the truth that it was more than just a few Africans that gave up some other Africans, and that's how slavery started. Like the fight that they did, the 3 to 6 month boat ride, right? Going through silver. How can I not do this work? I have a debt to owe, right? Like to me, that's the motivation of not why I do it, but also why I stick with it. Is when I stop and think about those that came before. And I will also, in my own selfishness, say, Mia Jordan and Cindy Jordan, my 2 beautiful daughters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. So this next question, I know many of us struggle with this question. However, what do you all say when someone asks, what is one action that individuals can take to celebrate Black history and to support members of the African diaspora?
Oh, yes. We do struggle with this question, and we struggle because of the one thing. And to amplify maybe Kenny about the performative nature of what this, again, the tokenism that can exist when we're doing this work. We're celebrating 1 month for an entire, vast, diverse, beautiful people. So, if we are to choose one thing, the one action is actually more of a process, but it's one thing. And that one thing that I would ask all of us to do is to practice anti-racism, to learn what that means, to learn that it's not enough to be non-racist. We've got this 530 plus year forces on these lands that have pushed us and pushed us towards division. And it's going to take many of us, all of us, to push back on that. So when we talk about anti-racism, and our Oregon Health Authority agency is very much, that's our foundation for work. It's not at the expense of other and additional people that also have been pushed to the fringes by oppression. And it is to say we are leading with race. We are leading in a way where we are reflecting on our actions day in and day out, our behaviors day in and day out, and understanding that if you grew up on these lands, you were conditioned in racism. So we've got to decondition, uncondition, dismantle, and rebuild. And it's not enough to say, I didn't say that word, I didn't do that, that is not enough anymore. You gotta be in there. Okay, you've gotta be in there. I'm asking all of you to educate yourselves. For those of you who don't know what anti-racism is, practice that, make mistakes. Please, there's so much fear in making mistakes. I make mistakes every day. We all make mistakes. Stick with it, support each other in the work, and do the work of anti-racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Chelsea, can you answer that same question? Please?
Yeah. I just want to, I think, first echo every last word, Ms. Leanne, that you put out into the ether. 100% agree with that. I have other things I'll get there in a second. I think, particularly as state employees, it is your responsibility to do the work that Leanne is talking about. We are decision makers for large institutions that have real impact in communities, and it is your responsibility to understand the way in which our white supremacy culture, whiteness, racism, all impacts how you make decisions in your workplaces. That to me is the most foundational thing that anybody can do. I would further say, and I giggle a little bit because this is one of those, these are some of these moments where I get a little fearful, but I'm gonna say the thing, particularly for white folks, you have work to do. And you have work to do. Google and the internet is your friend. You don't always have to rely on Black folks to do your education for you. In fact, I ask you, please don't do that. The reason why I giggle is I absolutely have moments in my work life, in this role as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, where I just had to say to white folks that I have built a relationship and feel that there is some level of trust, that I need you to go get white folks, and I need you to help support your peers in their consciousness raising and their learning, because I don't always have it to give. And I'm not going to give it all the time, because it can be soul depleting work. And so I need to be in partnership with white folks. So I just want to double down and appreciate you for that. I think in terms of an action, I also agree. I giggle again when I see one action, because there's so many actions that you can take. And so I want to encourage folks not to stay stuck in the one thing. One thing is a great way to start. You've got to start somewhere, but there's plenty of other things to do. Lean into your curiosity. Googling is your friend. There are so many events that I think happen everywhere across the state where you get a breadth of learning in the arts, in culture. We are, I feel grateful, and I'm really thinking, where's Nicole? Where's my cousin Nicole? Okay, so Dad is my cousin. My dad always used to tell me, and I always feel so fortunate that he was one of the first African-American history teachers in Portland Public Schools at Jeff in Portland. And so I, kind of answering maybe a little bit the earlier question around why you got into this work is a part of my birthright, I feel. And so I need to be engaged in this work. But he always would tell me that your history doesn't start in chains. And I know that wholeheartedly. And so you all need to know that our history does not begin in chains. And so I think there's so many different places to understand the African diaspora. The Oregon Historical Society is great to understand the history of Black folks in Oregon. That is important for all of us in state government in the state. The Oregon State University has really great special collections and archive where they have oral history. You get to hear from Black folks who've been in our communities in this state for years. And so it's important for you to sit and to listen. Pay money. I just want to say, pay money, okay? Patronize local Black businesses. When you're Googling, figure out where the local Black businesses are and go there and spend money. Don't look for discounts, spend the money, okay? Coffee shops, bookstores, plant stores, I'm a plant lady. All of those things I think are incredibly important. And again, I'll just say art shows, music shows, follow activists. There's so many brilliant people on the interwebs that you can follow. That really do celebrate our diversity and our resiliency. And I think the last thing I'll say is do it all year round. You can start now, that's good, but don't let it stop there. There's 12 months out of the year to celebrate how brilliant and amazing we are. So,
thank you, Chelsea. I was going to ask all of you all this question, but let's just go on and move on because we have a few more I want to make sure we cover. So this next question is going to be for Jamal, if you can kick us off. What pressures do you feel inside and outside of state government because you're doing this work as a Black person?
There's so many things that I could say, and I struggle with this question, but I'll start here. When you look at pressures, there's many pressures, not only in state government, but Dion spoke to some of that in the community itself. But when you're being the first person of color or Black person in an organization, there's a lot of pressure around that. Not only being the first, but being the only in that organization. Or you go into an organization where there's no one that looks like you in the agency or on leadership. It has many pressures around that. There's pressures where you feel like you have to overachieve expectations for a sense of belonging in that organization, and the ability to be forced to pave the way for others. When you're the first or the only to be able to bring others in the organization to recruit, so you feel there's a sense of community, like we have on this panel. being part of leadership, but only relevant when there's culturally specific questions or topics that's being asked. You're, Chelsea, tell us about X. Dion, tell us about Y. When we're talking about DEI, or we're talking about culturally specific things around race. But any other time, you're not seen, you're not heard in the organization. You're not taking serious, knowing that you have the background and experience to do the work that you're hired to do, but we have other folks, or it's stated, let's dig deeper into that question that you raised. That's good. But not today, we don't have time. But later on, we're going to get to it. Later on as it comes. And when we raise questions about that topic, there's retaliation. You get pushback and know your role, know your lane. We don't need to talk about that right now. And so there's a lot of those pressures that you see. There's pressures where being a DEI practitioner, it's stated that it's for Black folks. And only Black folks should be able to opine on what that role means and what we should do. Not understanding that DEI, we all should be focused on DEI, not just one person in the organization. Yes, it's expected with the governance expectations, but how are you internalizing that? And how are we actually using that for the better?
Thank you, Jamal. Leanne, can you answer that question as well?
And what was the question again, please?
I'm sorry.
I'm so involved.
What pressures do you feel inside and outside of state government because you're doing this work as a Black person?
It's kind of like, what pressures don't I feel? Be a much shorter answer. And I, having reached the age of 62, a bit older than my brother here, I have worked to actually not cave to those pressures. I remember a situation where, and this is where racism has conditioned us. And it has conditioned, from a Eurocentric perspective, it's conditioned the white psyche as well as the Black psyche, and all the psyches in between. And we run the risk as Black people of perpetrating and continuing to portray the roles that were put upon us, that we have been burdened with by racism. We can continue to play those roles without even knowing it. And this became really apparent to me when I was having a disagreement with one of my white colleagues, another division director. We are on the same platform, okay, in terms of hierarchy. And I had to change. It was the expectation that I would be subservient to that situation and that I would change, and I did not. And so what happened was I became vilified in that situation by that individual because I refused to change. And I thought, how am I going to live a life of being the villain? I thought, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to embrace that life. And I'm at the point now where I'm a few years from retirement. I'm in a position perhaps different than other individuals are. I can raise all kinds of heck, and I will. And those pressures are real. They are there. I'm not saying that. But what we have to do is not stay. We have to liberate. I'm learning. It's not that I'm there, but I'm learning to liberate myself because no one's going to do that for me. My life started before chains, and I will live my life that way. And I just encourage not only for people to live that way, but understand that there's got to be space for everybody to live that way. So if there's chains or shackles on any of us, there are chains and shackles on all of us. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't remember the question.
It's okay. Thank you, Leanne. Kenneth, can you answer that same question, please? What pressures do you feel?
Yeah, so when I think about this question, I do this work in law enforcement, right? So that feels like a lot of pressure from external sources. I've been fortunate to be with a group of leaders, a group of value-driven people at OSP that have made the work internally in our organization very easy. I think about some of the comments that were made. I think about a ride-along I went on with our superintendent in the back, who curious enough to say, you've talked about gentrification, I talked about the gentrification of DEI work, and so he was like, what does that mean? I want to see where you grew up. So we traveled, you talk about MLK, we traveled from MLK in Alberta to 33rd in Alberta, so he could see gentrification, what it looks like in a community where I grew up. And what it, we wanted to see my high school, we went to Grant High School, we went to Jefferson High School. The difference and the contrast between a beautiful high school that just got remodeled in a predominantly white neighborhood, a wealthy neighborhood, and Jefferson. When you're driving down Alberta, it's all bricks, and it's not very welcoming. So the pressures aren't what people would normally think. Usually people are like, oh, how is the job at OSP? Internally, it's fantastic. The pressures I place are on myself. There's a habit of high performers to exaggerate the necessity to do the work well. So every interaction, every speech I give at a new employee orientation or Sergeant's Academy, for me, I'm thinking through the friends and families whose lives this could impact. Because I don't want OSP to be the epicenter of the next national headline and police outrage and community outrage against police, and I don't want to contribute to that. So every time I wake up and speak with the folks I'm working with, that's the pressure that I feel. And then with that, everybody knows what I do, my friends and family, right? So when there's the pressure to make sure that their family members aren't on the news being a victim of police brutality. So it's all pressure that is placed upon myself. It's, because there's more than enough people to help share the load. There's more than enough buy-in with the process to kind of make it easy for me in the agency. But I think, a lot of times people will say, that sounds super unhealthy, Kenny. Perhaps. But I think the world could use more people that exaggerate the necessity, especially in public service, to do this work well and lead by example and create opportunity for the people and think through the long-term implications of our work, our legacy, our life's service and public service. The world could use more of that, so I don't tend to think it's unhealthy. I put that pressure on myself and face that, wake up, looking forward to that challenge every day.
Thank you. Let's see. Lisa, we have a mic. Can you answer that same question, please? The pressures do you feel?
I think I feel the pressures of being a black man. Let me go a little deeper. And let me start with just a few quotes from staff members here in the state of Oregon. Hey, Zell, can you just focus more on the good things that we're doing? This is a direct quote. Another direct quote. Ezel, I'm not a caddy in this paradigm shift. I wish you would recognize my efforts more. Context. This employee does not report to me. I have no insight into the day-to-day responsibilities of this employee's job. Okay. What it feels like as a black man doing this work is it feels like being a coach on a team full of players who do not believe in your strategy. I work for the Public Utility Commission, so you ask me what we're doing. We're the economic regulators for the investor-owned utilities. He said, we want to know what equity looks like, but what we really want to know is only about equity and racial equity in community engagement. Because when I start saying things like, hey, one, we collect money for clean energy. Can we collect money to help people have basic access to energy? He said, nobody's ready for that, and that's outside of your scope. This is what it feels like as a black man, okay? Two, as a black man, it feels like this. When there's an opportunity to showcase me, now I have to be a hypocrite because I have to endorse my agency, and my agency is great. I have a lot of intelligent, smart people who believe in our causes. And I have a lot of people who have been conditioned by the same education systems that we all subscribe to. So when I think about the question, how does it feel like to be a black man? It reminds me of the question that was asked earlier. What's one thing I can do? But as a black man, that question is asked to me every day. But I am like y'all remember that, I'm about to date myself. Remember the little ball you can shake up? And you ask me a question. Right? So, this is Ezel. Hey Ezel, we need some help with our equity plan. What's one thing we can do? A couple of things we can do. Okay, here's what we can be equitable with the distribution of resources. That means we're gonna have to like lower some of the assumptions on revenue returns. Now I have to give you a new set. Okay. Okay, how about we engage community that we haven't typically engaged? We're gonna have to invest some more money in order to do that. Okay, all right. Can we work on a poverty simulation where everyone from our agency comes and gets to experience a day in the life? How about some asynchronous training where people can go ahead and just take the training and check out that they've completed? There, okay. This is what it feels like. This is what it feels like. That question that you asked was one thing we can do. I'm going to decipher it a little bit more. What's one easy thing I can do? And it's not easy to be black.
That's right.
It's not easy. I'm on overtime and I'm about to wrap it up. You asked me what it feels like. If I told you what it feels like to be a black person in Oregon, a black man in America, it feels like you're at war, but you're the one that's being targeted. And I have to go into unsafe spaces with people who claim to be my ally. But when difficulties arise, I'm going to be pushed out to the front and I'm going to look around and no one's going to be there. This is how it feels. This is how it feels. So I would offer that it's tough. And someone earlier said, like, don't do it for 1 month. I'm going to say pace yourself. Because if you ask most black people you would ask, if we were honest, it's exhausting just walking around in this skin. Because again, the question, what's one thing I can do? Center safety, center dominant culture safety. We're experts at that. We're experts at that. For once, I think I'd like to feel centered. For example, I drove down here today to have to pay the park to an event that I'm invited to. I love, you guys did a great job with the event. I'm just saying, like, these are the kinds of things that we don't think about. Like, we're invited guests. Here we go, I'm done, sorry.
Thank you, Giselle. It's okay, because I love your answer, so that's great. I'm debating whether or not we should move on to the next question, but I feel like this is a really great question because everybody has different responses, so let's just keep this one going. Brian, do you want to answer that same question? Would you like for me to read it?
Sure.
Okay. What pressures do you feel inside and outside of state government because you're doing this work as a black person?
The pressure, sort of as Kenny was saying, for me, is an internal pressure. It's a pressure of, have I become so much of a state employee that I'm no longer a meaningful representative of the people that I really need to serve? It was said at a conference about us as state in government around the work that we do, and they were always say it. You folks at state government, you do great work writing. Like we're all writing plans, right? Everyone's writing their DEI plans. The governor's up there saying, "Nod yes." Your plans will be ready by June 1st. But you know, in doing that, they challenged us, and I thought about this, and I've been echoing this, is that practice eats policy for breakfast. And so it doesn't make a difference what we write. It's what are we doing? And so the challenge for me is, am I doing what needs to be done in order to really affect the change that needs to happen? Am I living out what it is that we say we want to be, we want to do? And what does that look like? And so, and I don't know, sometimes that's healthy and unhealthy, but it's like, for me, don't, as a state agency or as government, don't ask me or even allude to wanting me to do any harm to the communities that we serve, because I just won't. Like, honestly, I love my job. I work for, you know, a really good organization. I have a really good supportive director who's always there to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and she has the heart, she knows the business and the work. But I'll be flat out honest with you. I don't get paid enough to do harm to the people that I care about. Yeah. And we should all have that feeling, that thought, those pressures when we're asked to go into communities and to do engagement. Community engagement is not a bottle of Tylenol. You don't pull it off when you have a headache and take it and then put it back on the shelf and close the door on it. And community engagement is ongoing work that you do in order to build a meaningful relationship with the communities that we serve around Oregon. At Business Oregon, we work under the mantra of prosperity for all Oregonians. And we have to understand that that prosperity means something different to each and every community. That prosperity to this person is different than what means prosperity to this person. So it's about taking the time and the pressure of taking the time to do the work, not just checking the box and meeting the dates and superficially saying, oh, we have a great communications department that can beautify this plan, or we hired the best consultant. But the real work of pulling up, you know, your pamphlet, getting in the mud, being there with folks when it's meaningful for them to be there, not just when it's convenient for us to say, oh, we have to have a racial equity impact statement for this. So let's just go meet with this group of people. Let's get a statement. Because really, they don't even half the time know what it is they're agreeing to. They'll just, you know, nod, and because as, you know, that pressure of the statement that we never get invited to the table, then you get invited to the table. So then you can never say no. Whether you're compensated for it, whether it's inconvenient. Because if you say no, then it goes back to the statement where you asked to be invited to the table, and now you're here, we've invited you, and although it's inconvenient for you, you should still show up. And so that kind of ongoing pressure of forever having to look in the mirror. And you know, like Michael Jackson said, you know, I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Ask yourself, you know, what changes do you need to make as an individual? What things do you need to impart to your organization? What types of values and what type of leadership should we be giving to our agencies, to our agency leadership, and to ourselves and to our communities, to all of our communities, all of our diverse, meaningful, valuable, beautiful communities that are spread out around Oregon.
Thank you, Brian. Chelsea, can you answer that same question, please? And then we'll start
Okay. Yeah, so echoing just so much of what you all are sharing. I feel a lot of pressure. I'll get there in a second. I also will say I feel incredibly fortunate. I did not want to take this job. I did not know if I could do it. I think I've struggled with imposter syndrome for a long time. And it was really because of one brilliant Black woman, Tricia Tillman, who was a consultant with us before. I'm the inaugural DEI director, but I really think Tricia is really the inaugural director, so I give all kudos to her. she's the reason why I'm here, because she had a very specific ask for me to step into this role, and she believed in me and I felt it. So that's why I'm here. And I will say the first couple of years was the most difficult 2 years I think I've ever had. I've been in the state government for a long time. I used to work for child welfare for about 10 years. I will say that I am still here because of my current boss, and I'm going to say her name all day long, Andrea Bell. She is a brilliant Black Afro-Latina woman who I just really would not continue to be here were it not for her. I joke with her, but sometimes I'm serious that if she ever decides to cut out, I might cut out with her. So I just want to say, like, I feel a ton of pressure. I'm also incredibly thankful that I have someone to commiserate with. Our perspectives are very different, but that's the beauty of like the diaspora, right? Is that we're not the same, but there's so much shared experience. So I just want to say that. I think some of the struggles I have navigated, both in this role, but also wherever I go, equity and racial justice is going to be the forefront of anything that I do. It was in child welfare, it will always be. But the comparison to other Black folks drives me crazy. We are all brilliantly diverse. We approach things from different vantage points. Our experiences are different. And this was a conversation I even had to have with Andrea when she became the director of our organization, is that people are going to come at you. People are going to think, well, if you're doing it this way, then Chelsea should do it this way, or vice versa. And I needed her to really know that I'll support her no matter what. And even if that means the way that she makes herself known is different than me, it's all good. So I think that oftentimes happens where I become the voice of all Black people. I don't want to do that. That's not what I was hired to do. I definitely don't speak for all Black folks. I think one of the other most difficult things, and this is where I think the soul, protecting my soul and spirit is important, is that I think as Black folks, we are both impacted by racism daily in all ways. And I almost said big and small, but even the small ways are big. So in all ways. And we still have to support others while we're being impacted by the very thing that we're trying to get people to not do. And so I'll never forget when George Floyd was murdered. I was literally trying to have conversations with my 2 Black boys that we are raising around safety, and then having to communicate to the agency about this murder that we all witnessed. And it was the most difficult thing. And I got to a place when we wanted to communicate that I just said, I'm not doing it. Somebody else can step in and say the thing, but it can't always be me. It cannot always be me. And I think I wrestle with that daily, both the impact and then having to support people through that. I think it's been very, very trying, continues to be really trying, even with the support that, I mean, you mentioned feeling really supported. I absolutely feel supported, and it still doesn't negate the fact that that is a very real thing. And I think the last thing I would say is, and I think this is really similar to what you shared, Brian, it's just, I've worked for state government for a long time. I really want to do right by my people. Particularly, I work in housing, and I've worked in child welfare, and I know the impacts that racism has had. I live in Cully. I drive up and down every single day, Alberta, to pick up my kids to and from school. I grew up the street from Peninsula Park in North Portland. I would watch gentrification happen. Every time a chain link fence went up, I already knew what was about to go down. And I work in affordable housing. So now I say chain link fence, and my hope is that it's affordable and accessible, right? But I think I want to do right by my people so desperately, and I know that government has been the main institutions that have done the most harm. So I think I just carry that with me daily. I think I also, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there. I carry that daily. I also know how slow government can work. And I know that because I'm a bureaucrat. You're to say that. I don't remember. But I also think, and Leanne, I really just appreciated your frame around liberation, because I think where I am really working on trying to grow is that no matter what, this is the right thing to do, and if people don't like it, then you can so your way on that. Because I think for me, and I promise this will be the last thing I'll say, I swear. As a housing institution, if we don't center race in every policy, every budget, every bit of resource that goes out the door, we're not doing no justice to anybody. And so I need people to understand, as the director of DEI in our organization, I need to know that people understand the way that their decisions are impacted, and I need them to do something different than what we've done before. And if we ever get to a place, and as long as I'm in this seat, I'm not gonna let it happen, but if we ever got to a place where people are just like, I just can't do it, I'm either out the door or you need to be out the door, because as a housing institution, just has to be the foundation, because there's just been too much harm done. So I try to keep that as my encouragement, to just always say the thing, and it's hard. I'm working on my liberation around that, but I think that those pressures sometimes make that very, very difficult.
Thank you. Now, I think Deanna, you're the only person who hasn't answered this question, right?
What's the question? The pressure
The
question?
pressures, yes.
I forgot
What
what
pressures do you have? Right?
So, that's the tough part about going last. My colleagues don't leave a lot of meat on the bone. I can find some gristle to chew on real quick. So, everything that was shared, resonated 100%. I will say this, I've learned in time how to release some of the pressure I felt I was carrying. I don't know when it happened. It might have been when my pops died a while ago, but I started feeling things real deeply. And it gets tough when you're a part of the community, right? And so, for example, if I am the director of equity for human services, but anytime I would hear a microaggression take place anywhere, I felt like that was on me. I gotta do better. I gotta help create a better culture, right? If I heard, then it's tough when you're part of the community, because then you have other, black folks looking at you, thinking you're a savior, you're gonna change stuff, and then all of a sudden you start looked at okay, no, you're leadership, you're not with us. You're with them, right? And then you're kind of stuck in there. So all those pressures I was carrying for a moment. But then this is where I learned, right? So, did I tell you I went to Africa? Did I bring that up already? If you haven't been, you gotta go. The world owes Africa. Let me just say that real quick. But one of the things that I learned, I remember sitting on a curb talking to an elder. And in so many words, they told me, listen, it's not your job to solve racism. It's not your job to solve transphobia or sexism and all that. You got a leg to run. There were people that were before you, right, that did awesome work. All you got to do is just run your leg. Figure out what's your leg that you need to run at ODHS. Because there's going to come a time when you're going to pass the baton to somebody else, and they're going to keep on running, right? So you don't have to solve everything. You may not even get to the finish line, but if you can just decide and figure out what's the leg that you're supposed to run, and run the hell out of that leg, and pass that baton so ODHS is in a better situation than what it was before, then you've done your job, right? That relieved all the pressure off me right there. Like from that point, I was like, yeah, I put too much on myself. But if I can look and realize what I can do, right, with the amount of time that I have and the awesome team that I have, yeah, it just put my soul at rest. And I feel good about it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, this next question, I'm going to ask both Chelsea and Ezell to answer. How do you engage with communities and individuals to ensure that their voice and needs are represented in DEI initiatives? And let's talk about also, the balance of power, what that means. Yes, Ezell.
I think, I would say, I think we have to first acknowledge that when I say white supremacy, it's been the order of the day. And when I say white supremacy, I suspect that what comes to mind is maybe someone with a long beard, maybe someone with a big jacket, maybe someone in rural America. I suspect that we probably are thinking someone that supports Donald Trump. And that's not, while those things may be true, that's not what I'm referring to. When I say white supremacy, it is the idea that when we come to the table, we're bringing the solution. How many times in your agencies have you heard this? We need to educate. We need to educate this population on the way we do things, right? That way they can come to the table and know how to participate. Not, we need to examine the way we negotiate. Because if you did, I would say we have to acknowledge this, that historically, if you were a non-white person on this continent, what does it mean when a group of white people come and want to engage with you? Historically, where has that ever yielded good results for the non-white person? So there's a legacy of that here in Oregon. And that legacy is still present today. So when we talk about community engagement, we think, oh, well, what you trying to steal now? Or I think, what you trying to take credit for? What you trying to colonize now? First you colonize Oregon, then you colonize Northeast, you say, oh, wait a minute, there's some land right here, we need that. Okay? You told the natives, hey, whose land is this? Nobody really owns this land. I borrowed this from a comedian, by the way. So nobody really owns this land. Land, like ownership, like we're stewards. Well, since no one really owns it, how about we go ahead and claim it? And guess what? Now I need you off my property. This is how it looks when we, as government, come to engage in community. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that there's no real reason for you to trust me coming to your community. As a matter of fact, you probably should put me on the first thing smoking. Dear Martians, the humans are coming. It's not a good look. Send them on back home. But I believe with this, understand that there is a contextual landscape to how it looks when we come to community. Also understand, most of the time when we are talking about community engagement for one of our government agencies, it is for the purpose of some sort of economic benefit. So let's be honest about that. And I want to yield the balance of my time to Chelsea.
Good. I just second all of that. I'll just read a quote that was shared with me several months ago by Raji Hunjan and Jethro Pettit. And they say, making change happen means both understanding the power that prevents change from happening, that protects an unjust status quo, as well as understanding the power we have within ourselves and with others to create change, hopefully towards a more just, sustainable, and positive future. And I think before we talk about rebalancing power, I think you have to have an understanding of where it lives, and you have to be honest about where it lives within your organization. And where it does not actually live. I mean, we know we have power, but I'm talking about in a culture that centers whiteness, right? We don't have power all the time, ever. And so I think, I think I'm thinking about that as I think about what you shared, Ezel, in that it's not just about, it's understanding power, it's also like listening. Just like be quiet and listen, because the solutions that you are looking to are probably already there, and they're already in community. But we need to resource community to elevate it, to make sure that those solutions are centered. And what it ultimately comes down to at the end is resources. We got plenty of them in this state, in our agencies. We have to have the courage to start to look at redistributing where those resources go and listening to what community is telling us they need, not what we want them to have or what we think they need, because we may not have those experiences. And so I think for me, understanding where power lives in the organization is critically important, and I think listening to understand and listening for those solutions that you can elevate and resource people to move, I think is just really, really important. I think the last thing I'll say is, you know, engagement to me, I love your analogy about like, it's not just Tylenol that you pop when something doesn't feel right. Like engagement is an ongoing relationship-based thing that happens. So don't call me call me when you don't need me. Don't call me just when you need me. Like, can we be in a relationship first before I come to you and ask you about solutions or any of the things? And I think as a set of institutions, you know, we want to center community engagement, we believe in it, but our framework around it is really like extractive. And so there's got to be ways that we can build ongoing relationships with communities, because folks absolutely do not trust us. And they shouldn't. They shouldn't. We haven't proven ourselves to be trustworthy over generations. And so I think there's something different in the way that I think we need to be engaging communities. And I'll say that both externally, but I'm also talking about internally too, right? And so for me, like the solutions to how we build out initiatives, I want to center folks of color, period, point blank. And I want to be really specific about race, and I'm talking from the perspective as a housing institution. All of the disparity that we see across the housing spectrum, when you layer race on top of it, and I'm talking about even the multiple beautiful ways that people identify, when you layer race on top of it is the thing that drops people into disparity the quickest. So that's where we have to focus. It doesn't mean that we do it to negate all of the beautiful ways that people identify, but it also means that if we can do the things that are hardest, first we can reach the deepest disparity, everybody's going to benefit from that. And so that's where we need to start internally with our agencies before we start building out initiatives. Like, have some time to sit and be quiet and get curious, right? And build relationships with people and let it not be transactional.
All right, well, this next question is for you. What advice would you give to someone starting their journey in state government DEI, particularly someone from the Black diaspora?
I think the advice that I would give is, you know, first and foremost, to never forget that if I were talking to a group of new Black employees, that we come from the foundation of resilience, and that regardless of what you experience, you can make it. And to never get comfortable being in a place where other people are comfortable with you being. If that isn't the place for you, if that's not your dream. And it's easy to get caught up in, someone's told me I'm the best at this, I'm the best at that. But it's not really where I want to be or what I want to do. But they're telling me I'm good at it, so that's what I'm going to do. Because that's what makes me look successful to everyone else. But to say, no, what does real success look like? And what does that look like for me as an individual? What does that look like for the organizations that I'm in? And to know that as state government, the state of Oregon, this government is one employer. And to network and to utilize the resources of those of us that are already here. Like, you don't have to reinvent this wheel. Like, it's still going, it's still turning. And to reach out. And I have this practice, and some folks say it's ridiculous, but everyone here can tell you, like, when we had like DEI meetings, the first time I see them on a meeting, the first thing I do is like connect with them. And I'm like, let's talk. Let's have coffee. Let's talk about what it is that you're doing. Let's see how your agency and my agency might do something together. And it's that togetherness. The minute you feel alone and isolated, you're on the downward trajectory with your career. And Oregon is a different state. I'm a Black Oregonian. And I tell folks like, that's different than being a Black, Alabama or, Georgian or Mississippian. Like, I'm a Black Oregonian, a second generation. My mother was one of the first Black babies born in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Like, long time ago. And so I know Oregon, and I know Oregonians. I've been raised around probably more white people than Black people, being Black Oregonian. And not that that's bad, but it has afforded me the ability to be able to sometimes fit in. I've been told where things like, oh, right, I'm comfortable around you. Like, I had a woman tell me one day, I wouldn't be uncomfortable. It wouldn't make me uncomfortable if you accidentally walked into the women's restroom. I was like, well, it should. It should. Like, if I just burst into the women's restroom, you're okay with that? She's like, I know, but you just make everyone comfortable. And it's not that I'm striving to be offensive to anyone, but I think that as we enter, state government, like, you have to look at the system as a whole. And you have to know that where you start may be far off from where you end if you open your mind to say anything's possible. And you may start at DHS and end up at Business Oregon. I mean, who knows? But I would just encourage folks to kind of open their eyes and be very inclusive around what employment could look like and what their career could look like, and to utilize the systems and the people that are there. There are lots of folks within state government that are willing to share and to shadow and to, step into places, again, like we encourage everyone else that might feel uncomfortable. Step into organizations that may not feel like when I went to, for example, to the Youth Authority, never ever did I think I would ever land in an organization that locks up kids. Not that the organization does that, but that has that authority over kids. And how many Black kids. The way that when I went in there, like, my heart broke to see so many Black boys and to go home, and I have 2 Black boys. And I think any of those boys could be my boys. And I have a responsibility now. And I have a responsibility that, regardless of however long I stay there, to make that better for them. And so to know that we have, again, it's that weird responsibility thing, and it's not going to leave, and embrace that. Embrace the fact that, when you're working in housing and you know that we need affordable housing for Black people or people of color, even that, it's going to be part of my responsibility to get out there and help make that happen. It's going to be part of my responsibility at Business Oregon to make sure that the voices of small business owners and those that are Black business owners are heard, and that the things that they say about us, regardless of how they make us feel as an organization, it's true if it's true to them. And to never, ever disregard what's true to someone, what their reality is. And so, as a new employee, I would encourage, especially, young Black people, like, be resilient, be open-minded, be inclusive, and be engaging. Just be engaging. Know people, know what's happening, know what's going on, and don't ever be afraid to step in it. You can step out of it. But step in it because it's worth stepping into.
Thank you, Brian. Leanne, can you answer the same question?
I will, and I remember the question.
I'm happy to repeat it.
I got it. So first, I heard the word resilience, and that to me is really critical. You're going to hear from the optimistic and the pessimistic. So optimistic is, we have to, I would advise that we, each of us, know our story and know your resilience and know the strengths that exist within you currently, and that historical, even if you don't know the history, you know there are those who came before. You know that there are those who, from my perspective, from my history, survived those months in the hull of a ship. Somebody I'm here because somebody else survived, because they were resilient. And that is a beautiful story. I became really connected with who I am and my own strength as a human being when I started becoming a storyteller. And that knowing, and even if your story began 6 months ago, I mean, that's what you interact with and relate to, then that, embrace that, know that. And what I know is that my my great-grandfather on my mom's side was the first person in my mom's side of the family. I knew him as a toddler, I remember him. And he was the first person in my mom's family to be born above the Mason-Dixon line. So we are just not far removed from the story. And the optimistic part is the resilience and the pieces that we connect to that tell us who we are and what's at our core. And always having that place of strength to go to. And that place of strength may shift and change, but you gotta have it to survive this work, to survive this society. So that's a piece for me that is extremely grounding. And when I can connect to that, I feel like I can do anything. Okay, so that's the optimistic side. Pessimistic side. What I would say is don't fall prey to what we have already identified on this panel as white supremacy. Please know that there are tricks of the white supremacy trade that are designed explicitly, consciously, to divide us, to conquer us, to make us feel less than. And that could come in the form of, Leanne, you know, you're a good one. So I get a compliment, quotes around that, and I can easily fall into, oh, okay, I've got this. And always remembering that that is what happens. That is what is designed to happen to ensure that we stay as Black people in whatever place people think Black people should be. Okay? So not falling prey to those types of dynamics. I spoke earlier about this expectation of subservience. That's alive and well, and it's played on us as well. I remember someone saying, well, here's Leanne again on her high horse. Yeah, my horse is high, and it's higher than your horse. And so, I mean, because I will rise above. And I always remember my story, who I came from. I came from parents that when they moved into their neighborhood in Northeast Portland, 58, somewhere in there, 60, somebody in the neighborhood took all the for sale signs, put them in their front yard, and tried to destroy their magnolia trees. My dad went out and saved two or three of those trees, because my mother loved them. And what I will say is that they could have stayed in that place, but when, and this is kind of the upside of the story, when in 1960 something, I can't remember what year it was, there was just a kerfuffle around the neighborhood that hippies were moving in. You know, and everybody was just like, oh no, there's hippies moving into our neighborhood. And so my parents could have said, thank goodness there's someone that's, you know, they can pick on somebody else. No, my parents were the first and only people in that neighborhood that went over to where these so-called hippies were, knocked on their door and welcomed them. And then every day after that, when they missed their bus to Portland Community College, my mom was driving us to school. She'd see Chris and Ann, she'd pick them up, put them in the car, these are the hippies, drop us off at school, and then go drop off Chris and Ann at PCC. So I guess how I pull this together is, there is this, Mrs. Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And always remember that we have it in us as a people to always go high. Always, always, always. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth. like me to read the question?
No. So I'm going to take my answer a little more succinct, I guess, less storytelling, probably less beautiful. But when I think of advice I could give to somebody starting out their DEI journey, I reflect on what's been successful for me. And I lead with having people enter this work with a goal to understand their audience and build trust with their audience. I think oftentimes when I see DEI practitioners fail, they enter the work with a message and an agenda to convey on their agency or their organization or their team, and that doesn't usually land well when it's not the needs of the organization, when people, they haven't assessed, are people ready to hear this message or not. So I lead with seeking to understand and build that relationship and trust with your audience. The second kind of practical thing I think is worthy for people to do is to also consider their work, like find ways to add value to everything you do and throughout the organization. So I think about my work, and if I can find a way, I'm successful when I found enough ways to add value that people above me in leadership and the organization views my work as essential, and they start inviting me into spaces that I would have never asked to go into in the first place. So find ways to add value throughout everything you do, be kind of inexplicably connected to the strategic operations of the organization, which I feel fortunate to, at OSP, to have done that. And then finally, I think it was mentioned earlier, but rely on and build network with the people doing this work. You hear people say often, it's lonely, it's isolating. Don't bring that to us. Don't off-put those struggles, it's common. However, I'm more than willing to engage with folks if they bring their curiosities. What's successful, what's working, what frameworks have you gotten traction with, where are you struggling in your work? And when people engage in that conversation with me, more than willing to engage in that, not only with the folks up here, but I also do this work in an organization that's specific to DEI professionals in law enforcement across the nation. And when we bring ideas to one another and identify and just build on each other's successes, what's working, what's not working, that seems to be more effective. So those three things, know and build trust with your audience, add value through everything you do, and then collaborate with others to do the work.
Thank you, Ken. Go ahead and hold on to the mic, because this will be a final question for everyone. Really, I just want to know if there's anything else that you want to add, if you have any final thoughts or comments for participants, our audience members.
There's a lot that is left still on the bone, right? Every one of us would probably spend this 90 minutes talking about every single question and the work that there is to be done. And the thing that I wouldn't be able to say tonight if I didn't acknowledge, especially in government and in public service, is the hypocrisy that often we live with and we exist with as leaders in government doing this work. And specifically, I'll shout this to the mountaintop and keep saying this, specifically, like if you look back at our state's affirmative action executive order dating back to 2008, it says things like a manager's performance, a key consideration of a manager or supervisor's performance is going to be their progress on agency affirmative action or DEI goals is what we kind of call it now. So not to put anybody on the spot, but just think about when you do your performance evaluations as a manager or supervisor, when you're a leader that's promoted or appointed people into positions, have you considered their effectiveness in achieving agency DEI or affirmative action goals? And if the answer to that is no, then you're failing not only the people worried, but we haven't complied with what it is you're telling the people we will do through executive order. And that those conversations go over well in a law enforcement organization that is like, hell-bent on compliance and structure, but we don't have the infrastructures to continue to share that and make sure everybody that onboards into a management position, that they know this, things that, so one of the questions was, that we were milling about was like, how do we move from talk to action? And there are so many things on paper that we should be doing that would have tremendous impact. So I think back to that executive order says 2008. So I think about the life of 16-year-old boys, girls up in the Portland area that are struggling, kids that are killing themselves, kids that are addicted to fentanyl. Just drop something. I think about the life that and how different those lives could be if we did, as leaders, what we say we're going to do. And for me, my sense of urgency, as we kind of review DEI plans across the state, my sense of urgency is really high because I have family members and friends from this community that haven't been afforded the opportunity that Oregon says that we're going to, we're liberal, progressive, we're saying all these things. And I think about, I went to Good in the Hood at my old elementary school, right? Neighborhood completely gentrified. Every house has a Black Lives Matter sign. But the only people in attendance are the people that I grew up with and went to MLK elementary school with, and their family and their friends. And so the efforts have been so disingenuous. If I could leave, and sorry, this is like ending on a dark note, but that's the pain and the frustration that a local poor kid from Portland who's ascended into leadership positions and having influence doing this work, if I could impart one thing as you guys all leave, is to think about how we go from not just doing things, right, like that outward action that we talked about, but how can we internally reflect on our individual responsibilities to run the leg of the race, whatever that is, in our individual capacities as leaders, as employees, as entrepreneurs, we have an obligation to make this better for the people that come behind us. So that's my encouragement and the words that I'll leave you all with today. Thank you for engaging this, and I'll pass it on to Benjamin.
I want to leave you with a brief question, 2 questions. One, by show of hands, if you're willing. How many people knew that there was a reparations bill a few sessions ago that was put forth in the Oregon legislature? All right, perfect, okay, great. Those who didn't, you can ask anyone who put their hand up, they can tell you about it, okay? We know that it obviously didn't pass, right? I want to leave you with a question. Why do you think economic reparations is such a difficult topic for Oregonians and Americans to tackle? I want you to really wrestle with that. And I want you to wrestle with that against the backdrop of this. Holocaust survivors, reparations. Internment camps, reparations. Indigenous persons, not full, but reparations. So I'd like to ask you, why, wrestle with that. Why do you think it's so difficult for us to have that discussion relative to our Black Oregonians and Black Americans?
Thank you, Zach. So I'm going to close out today, for me, with pain and hope, because those two, I guess in my life I felt that because I know pain, I can feel joy, and because I know joy, I can feel pain. And those are all part of the human condition that are necessary for our survival and for our connection in terms of relationship. So the hope is that with many of us, we have within our power, we have the power to truly overcome the 530 plus years of colonization on these lands. Yes, it's baked into our systems. And we have the capacity and the brilliance to change that, and we should. The pain part of that is, I'm just going to be really honest, I've never been so frightened for this year, 2024, than ever in my lifetime. And so I call back upon the hope and call back upon the power of this room and the power that we have in the collective of our brilliance, our care, and our wisdom. We're going to need all of us that if you're slightly prone to move towards justice, now's the time to run. Pick up the baton. Dion said I was a track athlete, so I can relate to that. Everybody, you all got batons. We're passing it off. We're running this race together. Please, 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 don't let us, our society, our people, humanity, please don't let us fail. Please. families, and we're moving in that direction.
Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah,
Now, y'all,
thank you.
not to get to where we're at time, so I just want to make sure we keep it real quick.
Okay,
All right.
rephrase what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Highlighting what was already said, I think 3 things that stand out for me. One is definitely, let's make DEI mandatory, no longer extra credit, right? That's what it actually feels like right now. Another one, invest in Black community. It makes all the difference in the world. Then the last piece, and I'll show you as fast as I can, you said some of our reparations that stood with me. You see on my shirt, HBCU, that's Historical Black University. We had that same conversation. Our only fear around that was if you gave us all $2,000, that would be great, but, or $200,000, that would be great, but if we lost $200,000, $200,000 would not stop mass incarceration. Give us all $200,000, it's not going to change the systems of education. It's not going to change the oppression that sits in government. But let me tell you what America can do. What America can do is give us the royalties for the inventions that we created. The cell phones that you have right now, the stoplight that we stop at, put that money back into the Black community, we can do some things. Give us the royalties of the music that we make. Black America has more music royalties that's out there that we don't even own. If we could just get that back and have all the rights to our own music, then we could bring back Wall Street, we can have Black banks, we can have Black schools, we can have Black groceries, we won't go hungry, we'll have education, and we'll also have the chance for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that definitely changes what I was going to say. But to be brief, what I would just say is we have to stop treating like this space that we're all here together like that family reunion. We only get together when there's a death or there's an event to go to. We need to do more of this. We need to internalize the feedback that we heard from our DEI and Black excellent professionals up here and figure out how to do better. When you know better, you do better. But what are you going to do with the information that was shared here today? Are you going to go back to your agencies and do more? Are you going to wrestle with how not to be performative? Are you going to wrestle with how to truly engage and expand on DEI? Not just because what you're told you need to do, but because it's a value. And let's be more values-based throughout the agencies, throughout the community, and do more.
Thank you, Jamal.
Man, there's so much. I keep thinking about the race, and I'm not a track person, but I am a swimmer, so I'm thinking about like the swim relay race. That's just sitting with me a little bit here. I think I want to speak real specifically to Black folks, certainly on our panel, but in the room. Find ways to take care of your soul, and your heart, and your mind. This is very emotional, laborious work. I say it, I think I've said it in many spaces. Again, we feel the weight of the impact and we're navigating and we're leading through it. And if you don't have things that you've found that bring you joy, that feed your soul, find them. It could be anything. I'm a plant lady, love plants. I sing to my plants, I love them. I like to think send them back to me, send them back. They don't talk back. Right? I'm shocked if they do. I love music, right? My favorite place to be is in the car, the music pumping, I'm dancing, that brings me joy. Find those things, find find community. I'm so grateful to be up here with you all. I look forward to doing this again, not for a panel, but just to get together. And so find your joy, hold on to it, don't let nobody take it, because it's the one thing that you can rely on in the quiet hours, and sometimes we need to hold on to that. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
And I'll just wrap it up by saying, don't let this be a one-off. Continue these conversations within your agencies. Go back, think about what it is that's next. What's your next to do? That you got something from this. Don't let this be a Black History Month event. It's not a Black History Month event. It just happened to happen in Black History Month. And and I would also challenge, my challenge would be that the things that you might say to us after a meeting, I would challenge you to say during.
Come on. Say that again.
things that you would say to us after a meeting, I would challenge you to say it during the meeting. It's lonely when you only hear it after a meeting. And we all had those instances. And it's no indictment on anyone. But we all do it. The real meetings always happen after a meeting anyway, right? Real meetings happen after a meeting. You know, challenge you. Like when things come up and you see your DEI practitioner sitting there going like, you know, it'd be nice sometimes to hear someone step up. I mean, it happens for me. I'm proud. I support she's my director. I just want to say that she's always got my back, and she's like, she'll step up and say, well, I want to go back to what Brian said about this, because sometimes folks want to move on. And I would just challenge everyone, like, whatever you would say after the meeting. First of all, if you're only going to say it after the meeting, there's no action, don't tell me. Don't come to me with it. Don't come to us with it. But just say it during the meeting. Let it come alive. Let it stir. Put people in that position of being uncomfortable in something that's meaningful. Engage in that productive struggle.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you to each and every one of you all. It was an absolute honor being able to hear from each one of you all and to share the space. I'm going to hand it over to Melinda to close it out, and thank you all for coming today.
I was hoping I wouldn't stand in front of all of you, so my apologies. I can't actually move, so I'll make this quick because I know we're over, and just really appreciating all of your time to be here and listen. And my hope is that you don't linger on my words, but you linger on all of the learning and the beautiful stories we have heard. One thing I did want to name is that I've heard words like Black excellence and resilience today. And yes, that is 100% true. My hope is that we don't have to lean on Black excellence or expect it all the time. That Black folks can just show up and be themselves without having to be excellent or resilient. That spaces are created so that you can just be. Because I don't want you to be lonely. I don't want you to be tired. I want you to just be. And when I think about the actions we need to do as a community in the state, outside of the state, wherever we go, that so many people expect DEI folks to just tell you the actions, tell me the things I need to do. But what we do know in this work is, you know, if we could have solved our way out of racism, we would have already done it. At least that's my hope. What we do know in this work is it does require personal responsibility. So what I've learned from this panel is Google things. What I've learned from this panel is you got to do that learning and building relationship. That is actually key to changing our culture, to doing things differently. And so when I think of leaders in this room, every single one of you is a leader in this room. Every single one of you. You have a responsibility to do this work too. It's not just the people on the stage, it's every single one of us. And so my hope is that as you move out this door and think about what those next steps look like, that you see yourself in the work too. That you see your own responsibility in making changes, making a difference, changing our systems. Because our systems weren't set up to be equitable, but we can, each of us, start making those changes every day. And so with that said, just so much gratitude to each and every one of you. Brian, special shout out to you, for this is your brainchild, for sure. Black History Month is a thing, but Black history is actually the history and legacy of our country. It is every day. It is the lived experiences every day that has built the backbone of our country, and I want to make sure that we don't celebrate it just during the month of, but it's actually every day. And so as you leave today, think about all these things, and also Chelsea, speaking of like paying, like putting your money where your mouth is, the coffee and pastries, there's still a bunch left out there. They're from a local Salem-owned coffee shop that's Black-owned. Kingdom City Coffee, they ran out of business cards, so I'm going to make sure I say their names in the space. Kingdom City Coffee, there's lots of coffee, lots of pastries. Please take them, please enjoy them, please visit them, please support. Otherwise, just thank you, and have a wonderful day.